One of the most unique horrors of the year is Host, directed and co-written by Rob Savage. The entire movie takes place over Zoom as a group of friends gather via video call for a seance, which quickly goes wrong. Host is apparently the first movie made entirely during the COVID-19 pandemic, which makes sense, since the Zoom concept enabled Savage and his crew to film without the actors being in the same room, thus avoiding the problem faced by most movies and shows right now, which is the question of how to shoot while staying socially distant. Despite the limits of the Zoom concept and the difficulties of shooting remotely, Host still works as a genuinely creepy, hour-long thrill ride. In fact, it uses the limits of Zoom to its advantage. Video call disruptions like glitches and weird sounds are used both as red herrings and as scares, and the movie gleefully finds the horror in video backgrounds and the face filter function. Host also plays with shadows and negative space, along with the viewer's limited field of vision. After all, when the characters are focused on what's happening on their screens, they're the least aware of what's happening around them. All of this is supported by great stunt work and other practical effects by the team at Lucky 13 Action. Some of the scares we've seen before, but Host generally pulls them off with style and creepiness. Host was also released to the streaming service Shudder, meaning that many, if not most people, will watch it on a computer screen. In this way, the viewer isn't just an audience member, but almost a participant. Horror has a long tradition of taking spaces that people are familiar with and finding the creepiness in them. Psycho famously did this with The Shower, Jaws ruined The Beach for a whole generation. Zoom meetings are meant to be safer than face-to-face ones, but they're definitely not a place where most of us feel at ease. Host weaponizes the Zoom format to lend the movie a more realistic feel and to crank up the tension. It follows in the tradition of found footage films like The Blair Witch Project and desktop movies such as Unfriended. These genres often use the desktop format to comment on our screen-obsessed culture, and Host does so too. It taps into a lot of anxieties people are feeling right now. After all, by now we all know what it's like to be stuck inside the same four walls for weeks on end, with more and more of our interactions with the outside world taking place online. And of course, everybody knows that Zoom calls can be terrible. Luckily, the filmmakers never shove this in our face. In fact, the pandemic is never mentioned directly, merely hinted at by the characters' masks and elbow greetings. But Host explores the anxiety produced not just by the pandemic, but also by the new forms of online communication which have changed how we interact with others. It speaks to the loneliness and social anxiety which go hand in hand with lockdown. A new study from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the US indicates that rates of depression and anxiety have increased during the pandemic. A recent article in the New York Times found that reduced face-to-face interactions, along with more time spent indoors and on screens, have negative impacts on mental health. And then there are all the other negative aspects of being online. In his book, The World Beyond Your Head, Matthew Crawford says that for all our talk of an information economy, what we really have is an attention economy. Online, attention is treated as a resource, which companies pay to access. Shoshana Zuboff calls this surveillance capitalism, a new economic order that claims human experience as free raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction, and sales. Websites already track our data and sell it to advertisers, but according to Zuboff, the next step is to use this data to modify our behavior. This surveillance capitalism is becoming harder and harder to avoid, particularly during lockdown. As a result, Host works as a snapshot of our current moment in time. It shows that there are lots of reasons to be scared. But then again, the internet is also what made it possible for Savage and his team to create Host and share it with us in the first place. So maybe we have some cause for cautious optimism after all. Video calls still suck though.